They would later try to explain the night as if it had signalled its own arrival, but the truth is far more fragile than that. It began with the kind of calm people in cities take for granted, London humming its usual midweek tune, the familiar orchestrated blend of footsteps crossing wet pavement, buses sighing to a stop and shop windows glowing against the early chill. Even the air felt rehearsed, carrying that faint metallic scent that comes just before winter settles in for good. Nothing about the evening seemed prepared to rupture. The sky hung low and grey, indifferent in the way only a London sky can be, as if watching the city without truly seeing it. No one could have guessed that a tiny, almost invisible moment would tilt the entire night off its axis. It started with a thin thread of smoke curling upward near King's Cross, so faint it could easily have been dismissed as a trick of the street lamps reflecting off damp air. One man paused long enough to notice, lifted his phone, filmed without thinking much of it, and kept walking. That short, casual recording, barely half a minute of nothing, became the spark that shot across feeds around the world. People watched it long before they understood what they were witnessing, unaware that the first frame had marked the beginning of an unravelling. Then sound cracked through the gentle London hum, glass meeting concrete, a muffled thud blossoming into a brief, hungry flare of orange. Someone, nobody saw who, had hurled a bottle. When it burst, the fire crawled outward like a creature waking with a start, stretching limbs of flame as startled heads whipped around. More phones rose, live streams flickered alive. The flames, as if responding to the sudden attention, stretched and snapped and fed on the dry air. Within minutes, the world began speaking in the blunt language of hashtags and clipped captions. London was burning. A police van was the next to catch, its sirens blinking uselessly from inside a growing cloud of smoke. Red and blue lights flaring like a heartbeat fading under ash. Officers backed away as the crowd surged, swept forward by a chant that seemed to erupt from every direction at once. "Protect our children!" The words rolled in waves, crashing over the street with eerie precision, as if strangers had suddenly discovered a shared rhythm. Above it all, helicopters carved frantic circles in the sky, their spotlights jittering across rooftops. The city's usual palette of amber streetlights drowned beneath the deeper glow of fire, painting familiar streets in bleeding colours of anger, dread, and something more unnameable. It felt theatrical, almost scripted, except there was no one directing it behind the thick walls of number 10. Inside, the silence was so heavy it felt staged. Curtains drawn, lights dimmed, aides moving like shadows in a building suddenly too small for the fear swelling inside it. No speeches, no statements, only the steady hum of emergency screens casting their cold light over tense, sleepless faces. When a security official finally murmured that they had lost control of London Bridge, no one dared challenge the words. In that moment, it stopped being a place and became a metaphor for authority collapsing in real time. Across the city, neighbourhoods began to splinter. Shoreditch lit up in bursts. Camden crackled with heat. Brixton pulsed with the synchronised stomp of thousands moving almost as one. Riot police formed lines that looked steady from afar but trembled up close, their shields catching sparks as they pushed, fell back, pushed again, and faltered. Through the thickening smoke, a new chant beat through the crowds. "Whose nation?" A pause, then the roar. "Ours." Not a plea, not a question, a claim. Traditional broadcasters fought to keep up, still stitching together cautious segments while the unfiltered truth bled across countless live streams. One officer, visor cracked and voice strained, confessed into someone's shaky phone. "We're no longer in control." The clip ended abruptly, leaving the final words hanging in the digital dark like a warning. Shops slammed down metal shutters, makeshift barricades rose from bins, planks, crates, anything frightened hands could lift. Drones drifted above the capital, capturing scenes that felt unreal even to those standing inside them. Parliament glowed red beneath the pulsing firelight. Narrow alleys flickered with shifting embers, the flames reflecting a city tearing at its own edges. By the time crowds reached Parliament Square, the ground itself felt like it was vibrating, alive with the force of thousands. Flares carved red streaks through the sky as chants rolled against stone buildings. Inside, ministers shouted over one another, voices cracking from panic, not conviction. Orders were given, revoked, redrafted. Every command came too late. When an aide burst in to report that Trafalgar Square had fallen to protesters, the room froze. The Prime Minister's eyes drifted past the window, unfocused, and he whispered something not meant to be heard beyond that room. God help us all. But unrest travels faster than prayer. It seeped beyond London. Birmingham woke to shouts echoing through narrow streets. Manchester filled with marching feet. Bristol led Newcastle. The pattern spread like a heartbeat racing across the nation. Outside migrant centres, tempers ignited. Police stations barricaded themselves. Helicopters carved relentless loops above city centres, their noise blending with sirens in a chorus of unrest. In one video, filmed on a quiet street, a line of military veterans stood between clashing groups, silent, immovable, unarmed. "We served once," an older man murmured. "We'll stand again if we must." The stillness of their line struck millions. The government's next move was to choke the flow of information. The BC froze on static frames. News channels stalled mid-sentence. Certain hashtags quietly stopped refreshing. But silence only sharpened suspicion. People fled to other platforms, found loopholes, shared footage in encrypted corners of the internet. The night refused to be hidden. Power grids flickered. Parts of Westminster slipped into shadow, leaving silhouettes pacing behind frosted glass. The Prime Minister appeared on screen hours later, insisting all was stable. But the country had already seen too much chaos to believe him. The broadcast cut out midway, not because the signal died, but because the nation stopped watching. Then came the moment that became the defining symbol of the night. In Parliament Square, amid drifting smoke and the fading echo of sirens, a single police officer stepped forward. His movements were slow, deliberate. He placed his shield on the ground, its edge tapping softly against the stone, and walked away. No speech, no gesture of rebellion, just a quiet refusal. Then another officer followed, and another. Soon an entire row of shields lay abandoned in a neat line like relics from a battle already surrendered in the corridors of power. Panic thickened. Phones rang unanswered. Advisors argued until their voices frayed. Ministers barked orders no one had the resources or the will to enforce. Armoured military vehicles rolled through London streets. Some believed that the show of force would restore order. Instead, the crowd grew louder, more resolute. Something deeper had been stirred awake. In Brixton, a line of vehicles halted. Young soldiers stepped out, glancing around with uncertainty, boys barely older than the ones chanting in front of them. For a long moment, they didn't move, didn't speak, didn't raise their weapons. They simply stood there, unsure of what role they were meant to play in a nation arguing with itself.